order that said that we should release Mr. Bent by December 31st, 2015. We wanted to let Your Honor know that the Corrections Department does not have the authority to release someone on parole, and Mr. Bent, because he has served prison time, must have a parole term, and only the parole board can determine that term, and only the parole board can grant or deny parole. And in this case, the statute is clear that there must be an approved parole plan and conditions of parole signed by the parolee before he can parole. None of those have happened yet, and that is why the department has not released Mr. Bent from custody. I wanted to make Your Honor aware of that. I also wanted to make Your Honor aware of the fact that on February the 5th, coming up very shortly, there will be a parole hearing for Mr. Bent. But to be honest with you, Your Honor, I don't believe that he will be approved for parole at that time. There are concerns from the parole officers, and they made recommendations to the board. The board can overlook their recommendations if they want to, but the recommendations are that where he would live would be in a place where there is not adequate cell service, and as a condition of his parole under Section 31-21-10.1E, he must have an electronic monitoring device on him, and one could not be used at the location where he would propose to reside. I don't speak on behalf of the parole board, Your Honor. I'm only here on behalf of the Corrections Department, but I'm merely pointing out to you that these are some concerns that I believe that the parole board will have to look at. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Your Honor, I didn't hear what you asked me.
Actually, there's so much
Judge, should I hang up and you can call back in?
Yes,
sure.
Go ahead, hang up and let me try calling back.
Okay, thank you,
This
Judge.
one's dead.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's good. I'll try that one too, though, just to make sure.
Hello? Judge, can you hear me?
Yes, and it's much.
Can everybody hear? Yes. Judge, everyone seems to indicate they can hear you much better.
And Mr. Brewster, I heard up to the point where you indicated that you did not believe the parole board would approve because a sex offender is required to maintain the electronic monitoring system, and it does not appear that service is available where he would reside. Is that correct, Mr. Brewster?
That's correct, Your Honor. And again, I want to be very careful, Your Honor. I don't represent the parole board. I represent the Corrections Department. I can't put words in their mouth, but I'm sure that that would be a concern that they would look at. And I'm just advising the court of the various reasons why the Corrections Department did not release this individual on December 31st, 2015. And that's really all I have, Your Honor, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brewster. Mr. Olson, was an agreement between the state and the defense. What is the state's position?
Your Honor, in this matter, the state, as you have indicated, did reach an agreement with the defense counsel under the circumstances, I believe, due to the defendant's health. However, the state is in a position in this case of really deferring to the Department of Corrections. This is an issue that they have brought forth, and it's the state will back the opinion of the Department of Corrections, but does not have a separate opinion to bring forth to the court.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Mr. McCall?
Thank you, Your Honor. If I could, there's several issues that haven't yet been laid out related to this. First of all, as was noted, the order indicated release by January 1st. At the beginning of January, Mr. Bent was scheduled for a surgery on his ear where the cancer has been, and that surgery was not performed at that time due to some decisions by the Department of Corrections. The surgery has been moved to the beginning of March, and there's a danger that he will lose his hearing permanently in his right ear if the surgery is not performed as soon as possible. So I wanted to let Your Honor know about that, because that was kind of what brought us all into this place in the first place. With respect to the parole board, we have talked to their attorneys. I think sometime around the time this motion was filed, I actually expected their attorneys to be here today. I'm concerned that their attorneys are not here, and that we might need to have a hearing with them involved, because they seem to be the linchpin, and they have insisted on following their administrative procedures over the court's order, and I have a real concern about that, because they had the order in November of 2015, and they had the opportunity to fulfill all of the requirements of the order, prioritizing the court's order over their own administrative process, which I think is what we normally do in state government, given the three branches of the separation of powers. And so I'm really concerned that an administrative process is affecting something that where they had enough time to go through their process if they had made a few changes. So I don't think it's, to come and not even appear at a hearing. I know they're aware of this hearing, but they only got, I think, a notice from DOC counsel yesterday, and so I understand that, but I still think that they are a necessary party to this matter, and I don't know if there's a case that is determined that the parole board is completely independent of the Department of Corrections. I know that they are asserting their independence, and they are a separate agency in a sense, but they are also intertwined with the Department of Corrections. So this is, I think, very important. The other issue, and Mr. Brewster was kind enough to inform me about this cell issue, we have enough time now that we know about it that we may be able to bring in proof and evidence to the parole board hearing on February 5th that actual cell service is available, and that cell extenders can be put into the home and through the Verizon cell phone service that is available there, that this issue can be addressed. My understanding, and I practice a lot in Albuquerque, is that these GPS monitors go direct to satellite, because in Albuquerque we have zones where people are not allowed to go, and I'm pretty sure that the ankle bracelet in that type of a situation is functioning independent of any kind of cell phone service. I'm not completely sure, but I think it has to be that way for those zones of protection to be enforced with those GPS ankle bracelets that we use in Albuquerque. So I'm a little confused on that issue, but since it's on the record, I thought I would bring that to the court's attention. And again, going back to the surgery in conclusion, there are several complications here. The concern is that he will lose his hearing. The other concern is if he's released in February, which is possible if this issue is addressed with the parole board, then he will have less than a month to put health insurance in place, as he is basically indigent at this point, to cover the cost of the surgery. If he is not released in February pursuant to the parole board meeting, or there's another parole board meeting that's scheduled for March 4th, my concern there is that the timing will cause an issue with the surgery, which is also planned for the beginning of March at UNM Hospital. So those are my concerns on behalf of Mr. Ben. And Mr. Ben is asking me, he wants to relay one other issue. Could I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, Your Honor. And let me correct the record on that. First off, the surgery on the ear has apparently been canceled by the Department of Corrections, the one that's in danger of losing hearing because of the expense. And I think it's the anesthesia expense that was a concern. But there is another surgery because the cancer is now on the other side of his face near his right ear, the other ear, the good ear, and that is the surgery that is scheduled for the beginning of March. So I apologize for getting that a little bit confused. So,
thank you, Mr. McCall. Is there now?
there's one other issue I wanted to bring to your attention and the state's attention, and according to the caseworker that Mr. Bent has, they were proposing to interpret a requirement of 8 years of parole from the amended judgment and sentence, and we can maybe visit that at some point, but I don't see that in the amended judgment and sentence, but I wanted to bring it to your attention and put it on the record. Again, my concern is if DOC feels constrained by the parole board's authority and jurisdiction with regards to Mr. Bent's release, then I'm concerned that since we don't know exactly what's going to happen, that we may need to have a hearing where we hear from their counsel, unless Your Honor can see a way to order a disposition of this that will resolve all the issues that have been put before the court today.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. And as Mr. Olson noted, this was essentially an agreement between the parties and it was approved by the court. I think Mr. Brewster is correct in their motion in that the parties nor the court took into consideration that the parole period. It seems like we need to do possibly two things. Either have the parties submit a second amended judgment and sentence reflecting the agreement of the parties and which does comply with section 312110E, or setting aside the judgment and sentence, the amended judgment and sentence, and the parties go back to the drawing board altogether. Mr. Olson, what's the state's position?
Your Honor, as you're aware, with your proposed resolution, the state hasn't had an opportunity to discuss this with Mr. McCall. I can state that I think the state would prefer to reach some sort of an agreement on an amended J&S, since we're the ones that kind of started this in the first place. So if you could give us some time to do that, perhaps we will submit it to the court, and then now that we are aware of the issue, we can include the issues of parole, the statute that you noted, as well as make sure that everyone's on the same page before we submit it to you, and then you could approve it and hopefully remove the necessity of having a further hearing on the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Mr. McCall?
I believe that is the best way to proceed, Your Honor. Thank you.
Your
Very
Honor,
well. Yeah.
Your Honor, this is
I'm
Jim
sorry,
Brewster.
Earl?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. This is Jim Brewster. May I address you one more time to clarify one point?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. McCall indicated that he wasn't sure that the department was completely separate from the parole board. I would point you to a couple of statutes that make that crystal clear. If you would take a look, Your Honor, at section 33-1-7 along with section 9-3-11, I think it's pretty clear there that the parole board is the one that handles parole issues, even though they are affiliated with the Corrections Department in the sense they are administratively attached to the department, but they have their own powers and duties and are separately represented by the Attorney General's office. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Brewster. Now, I do appreciate you bringing these concerns to the attention of the parties in the court. Clearly, we were deficient in not taking into consideration the parole period. Now, I'd like to ask one other thing, another issue that Mr. McCall brought up. What about a furlough for any operation, Mr. McCall?
Well, Your Honor, I think the biggest concern is these are what I would call major medical procedures because they're dealing with cancer. And so, as has always been the case in these cases, we have two conflicting interests here. One is the interest to to follow the original order or the spirit of the original order to have him released so that he can, being that he is a vegetarian and lives a certain very particular lifestyle that is not easy in the prison, that he can get back into the very healthy oriented lifestyle that he had at full speed. But at the other side, we have the issue of there are actual medical procedures being scheduled. Doctors are making decisions independent of this whole process because their duty is to save life. And then there's the third prong of the issue, which is whether the Department of Corrections will be involved, and then they make decisions also based on their budgetary constraints and how that impacts his ability to get insurance, because he can't really get, I don't think he can get insurance until he's out of the Department of Corrections. So all of these things are converging within the month of February, and action on his health issues, according to the doctors, needs to be taken as soon as possible, which I think has been scheduled for March. So I think what would be most efficacious, probably given the updates that we now have on his medical process, would be if myself and Mr. Olson and Mr. Brewster and the attorney for the parole board could all maybe do a conference call regarding this second amended J&S, and at that time we could try to address this cluster of issues, because DOC is affected by the medical issues. They have a duty and responsibility, and yet they're in the gray because they don't know exactly what the parole board is going to do about the release issues. So it might be that we should all get together in a conference call or something like that to address all of these issues in that second amended judgment and sentence.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Mr. McCall and Mr. Olson, please submit a second amendment judgment and sentence within the next 15 days. If you are unable to agree, please submit a request for setting and we'll schedule this matter for hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor. We will do that.
Mr. Olson, is there anything else?
No, not on behalf of the state. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. McCall?
No, thank you, Your Honor. No, thank you.
Mr. Brewster?
No, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and I really appreciate you accommodating me telephonically. I'm glad that we were able to go ahead and convene this hearing. Court is adjourned. Everyone have a nice day.
Thank you, Judge. You too.
Thank you, Judge.
You too. We'll be getting dug out.
Well, my sister's out there now, so hopefully we can get out here within the next hour or so.